Good afternoon. Welcome everyone to today's Academic Advisor Forum, advising that isn't lost in translation. I'm so glad to see so many people are joining us today via Zoom. As a reminder, if you do wish to receive Master Advisor credit for today's Advisor Forum, please make sure that you enter your name and department in the chat feature. Today's advisor forum will be recorded and posted on the Mo State Advising YouTube channel within the next 1 to 2 weeks. So if you know of someone in your area who could benefit from the information being shared today, allow us 1 to 2 weeks to get that posted on the Spring 2025 playlist. And please refer individuals to watch the forum. A couple quick announcements before I turn it over to today's presenter. First, I did want to mention that we have another advisor forum this week, the Grad Advising Playbook, Tips and Tools for Grad Degree Programs. This is the partnership that the Academic Advising and Transfer Center has with the Graduate College. So each semester, there will continue to be an advisor forum dedicated to graduate student advising. So Dr. Carissa Holscher and Christy Graham from the Graduate College will be facilitating that advisor forum on Zoom this Wednesday, again from 12 to 1. So please plan to join us if your schedule allows. I also wanted to mention that we are 2 weeks from today away from the Kathy J. Davis Master Advisor Reception. So please plan to join us for that annual event where we will celebrate our Excellence in Advising Award winners for 2025 and celebrate academic advising on our campus for all of us who contribute to the daily mission. So the reception will be held in the Plaster Student Union Ballroom East. It will be from 4 to 5 p.m. on Monday, March 10th. So again, please make plans to join us at the reception. Again, final reminder, if you wish to receive Master Advisor credit, remember to enter your name and your department in the chat feature. Thank you all for being here. I will now turn it over to Phil Bridges. Phil?
Right. Well, hi, everybody. I'm Phil Bridges. I work over in the English Language Institute, and some days I know what I do, other days I don't. Do a little bit of everything, as you will see later on. But today we're just going to talk about lots of different topics with advising international students. The title was mostly just so I could get Bill Murray in here. So I'm going to run through lots of things and hopefully have a little bit of time for questions. But please, 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 if you have any questions about anything or problems or whatever, I'm available and happy to chat and problem solve. So let's get going. So we're going to just start really quickly talking about the state of international education. And then just talk about some things to consider when you're advising international students that you might work with. And then I think the main focus is just some resources that are available here on campus for the students and for you all. So with international education, it's a big deal. So these are stats. NAFSA is the big professional organization. These are stats for the state of Missouri for last academic year, 2023-24. And so in Missouri alone, the financial contribution of international students was over $1 billion. Missouri State, we have $57.9 million incoming, supporting 539 jobs. Obviously, that's not all tuition money. That's, looking at other things like living expenses and, other money that they spend here in town. But it's a big deal. And we're higher than Mizzou, so hooray for that. Here at the university, we have over 1,500 international students, nearly 100 countries at the moment. And one important thing to know is they come in from all directions. There are lots and lots of ways for an international student to be admitted. They might be directly admitted, which generally requires some sort of English proficiency test score. The TOEFL and the IELTS are two of the most common, but I think with the pandemic, we also started taking the Duolingo score and some other things. So they may have a proficiency test score. They can come in through the English Language Institute, which is our intensive English program on campus, where they would study English classes for a little bit before starting matriculating to the university. We have a branch campus in Dalian, China. We have lots of other partnership programs all across the world as well. There are scholarship programs through things like the Fulbright. So students come here in lots of different ways, and that may change their situation. So asking a student a little bit of their story is a good place to start. But here's the thing, what does next fall look like? Short answer is we don't know. With just the world in general and geopolitical events, it affects international intake a lot. And then obviously with the new administration, we don't know how it's going to affect the visa process and that sort of thing. So evolving story of what next fall will look like, but there's a lot of extra uncertainty. So, if you see someone in international work here at the university, be nice to us, because it's plenty stressful and we should be nice to each other anyway. But we're assuming we're going to have plenty of students in the fall. So some things to consider when you're working with international students. Immigration regulations are a big deal. Obvious, even outside of current political environment, immigration status is complicated, it is stressful. And because of immigration regulations, academic work for those students is very, very high stakes. Their academics are their permission to be here. And so all students face pressure for their academic work, but that can be amplified, for international students because they don't have the same kinds of safety nets. If an international student goes on academic suspension, that is a much bigger problem than it would be for a domestic student who, goes back home and then comes back. That's a much more complicated process. Another thing to keep in mind is that degree or timeline changes are complicated at best and can sometimes be impossible. So whereas, when I was an undergraduate student, I double majored just for the heck of it because I had some credits and didn't know what I wanted to do, and I was able to pick that up. And then in grad school, I picked up a certificate program and tacked on a extra year to my GA because I could, and that was totally fine. It generally doesn't work that way. If you're here on a student visa, changing those sorts of things is complicated and may be impossible. So keep that in mind. And very, very, very importantly, students need to remain full-time, at least until their final semester. But there are major consequences if they go below full-time. So things that advisors can do to help. A really, really big one, which, is just kind of best practice anyway, but the more detailed your advising notes are for international students, the better, both for the students, but also for anybody in international services who is having to advise that student on something related to their visa status or that kind of thing. The more information they have, the better. So those advising notes really are a wonderful tool where you can help the students and anybody else dealing with the student in another way out. Another important thing is to really help that student pay extra attention to the importance of course sequencing, because if it ends up that, oh, they have to add an extra semester or something because they didn't take this prereq in time. Um, that again, mixed with the immigration issue, becomes a much bigger problem. Like uh, where it's not just a financial burden or a time burden, but it can really cause lots of issues. Be extra careful with dropping courses or scheduling too many online courses. Uh, Again, they need to stay full time, and there are limitations to how many online courses they can take at a given time. So watch out for that. So yeah, just wanted to show off a very robust, super helpful advising note. Lots of detailed information explaining some of the why for the advice that they're giving. So thank you. Really nice job. All that's good. Okay. So other things to consider, um, we like a fish doesn't like recognize the water that it's swimming in or whatever. I'm not saying that well, but we have heard that kind of explanation for culture before, where we don't think about our own culture. And so, as a student, I didn't think about academic culture. It's just the university was what the university was, and it was kind of like high school, but a little bit different, and just kind of walked through it. Um, but American university culture is different from academic cultures in other places. You know, cultures are different, university culture, academic culture. This is all, I'm not saying anything new here, but this can really affect international students' expectations about how they should behave in a classroom. Like, are they expected to speak? Should they answer questions? Is it okay to like show that they don't understand? Or what academic integrity looks like, or how to interact with a bureaucracy, all that stuff. You know, it's our numbers have decreased significantly, but on the last point of interacting with the bureaucracy, 10 years or so ago, we had lots and lots of students from Saudi Arabia, and culturally, it was, the expectation was like you negotiate things, even if you don't expect like the negotiation to go anywhere. It's just that was part of like the interaction with the bureaucracy is you ask for an exception, or you ask for different circumstances, or you ask for something. If the other person says no, it wasn't necessarily a big deal, but that's not how our bureaucracy works. And so, back then it was pretty regular for us to have, people calling our office or talking to us about like, oh, these students, they're just asking for everything and everything's a negotiation. And part of it was just culture and those students not understanding how things typically work here, and the people in the offices here not understanding how things typically work in that culture. And so people were getting frustrated. Um, so just know that that's going to be different from student to student. And so we need to get them ready to like swim here, but we need to do that with some compassion and some understanding and grace. Uh, so think about your own expectations. Like, how do you expect a student to interact with you? And communicate that with the international student. And if they are step outside of that in some way, don't assume bad intent, but try to extend some grace and like educate them on your role or your expectations or that sort of thing. And hopefully the world will be slightly kinder. Just to remind us of all that, let's show Bill Murray again. Um, so another thing to keep in mind is that we don't just speak English here, we speak Missouri State University English. And just for a fun little example, after SOAR, UGs, and RCAS with OK GPAs should go to the PSU to find about SGA ASAP. What the hell does that mean? Right? Again, we're swimming in our own university, our own bureaucracy, our own like lingo. And we don't think about how meaningless these things are, right? SOAR is a thing, but SOAR is not, I can't even think of what SOAR stands for. Apologies if that is your office. I know what SOAR is, but like Missouri State has its own jargon. We have our own place names and organization names, and students don't know that. So if you think of like a first generation student, which there's lots of great training and people that work with that, it can be a really similar population in that a lot of international students don't have that support system or that kind of just passive knowledge of what the culture is like here and of what the institution is. And so just keeping in mind that anything we can do to explain and to educate is helpful. Um, so, take something like pride, right? It has a dictionary definition that, like most students, by the time they get to the university, should have a good idea what that is. But it also has a cultural meaning, and it also has a MSU specific meaning. And none of these are in any way similar. And we use these all quite frequently in a university, and students have to navigate that. So again, like being an educator, even when that's not your primary job, it is what we're all doing. Um, so some tips for that uh, that you can do to try to avoid some of those problems or navigate that and really support the students whenever you can, which is hopefully as close to always as possible. Give information both in writing and orally. Most second language learners, which is not all international students, but is a lot of them, like they're going to have one skill that they feel more comfortable with. Like maybe they're really confident speaking and listening, or maybe they're more confident reading and writing. And so if you give them key information in both ways, that's going to really support those students. It also, gives them something to look back on. So anything you can do to give information through multiple avenues, like whether it's a summary email later or it's those advising notes and making sure that the student knows that they can look at those too. um, that's always going to be helpful for those students. But something that if I had if I had like a magic wand, this probably wouldn't be that high up on my list, but if I had it would still be great. But if every office, or like even like teachers at the beginning of a class or whatever, but if people could put together some kind of like glossary of just key words and terms and like jargon and that sort of thing for their office, for their class, for whatever, and they shared that with the students, that would really, I think, benefit lots of students, but especially international students, because we just, in so many different ways, don't speak the same language. And so, we know our jobs, we know the services that we have to provide to the students. And so if we can kind of take the first step of like, okay, I'm going to clarify some of this language that I'm using so you can understand what I'm talking about. That's just kind of an easy step that you could do. And this other one, I do a lot of teacher training, like teaching people who want to go overseas to teach English there. And one thing we work a lot on is checking understanding. Um, and this is not something that comes naturally because we love the questions like, does that make sense? Or do you understand? Story I always tell is one time I had a class with about 15, 16 students in it. It was like the 6th week of class. I'd been working with these students, and just again and again and again, as I was teaching them, I would say, does that make sense? Does that make sense? And then I just have this little epiphany, and I slow down and I write, does that make sense on the board? And I ask the students, like, do you understand these words? Like, do you know what that means when I say, does that make sense? And 6 weeks into the class, when I'd been using this question to like check understanding again and again and again, 0 of the 16 knew what I was talking about. And so we do this all the time. And so in those teacher training classes that I teach, one thing that we really work on is asking questions that really check understanding of the information that you need the student to know. And your advisees are your students for those moments. Like there's key information that you need to make sure that they understand. And when we ask, does that make sense or do you understand? They're not honest. They may not want to lose face and be like, no, actually, my listening skills aren't that good, and I didn't understand anything that you just said. Or, it may be Dunning-Kruger or whatever, and like they understand something, they know that they know something, but it may not be what you're actually trying to check. So an example would be maybe you do a wonderful job explaining like when the student is okay to register, but you need to know that they know that information, right? Because they need to register on time or else classes are going to fill up and it's going to create more headaches for them and for you. So this feels really condescending to ask the question, and you kind of have to get over that. But asking them directly instead of like, okay, do you understand? Or do you understand about it registration or whatever? To which they will always say yes, or most students will, or you'll have anyway. But directly ask them, okay, when are you able to register for these classes? So ask a direct question, usually like a WH question that asks for the information that you need to make sure that they have. And then, if they answer it correctly, you know that they understand. If they don't answer it correctly, then you can make sure that they understand. But those better questions to check understanding really go a long way. But again, like as you may have to fight that feeling of like, are you being it feels condescending. It's like, I just explained something to you and now I'm asking you a question to see if you had that. But, if you ask it in a condescending way, then it's condescending. But if you ask it in a supportive, positive way, then it's just trying to make sure that communication happens, which is important. All right. Really quickly, any questions on that? Otherwise, I'm going to keep running. People are smiling. I'm going to go. Okay. Other things to consider. Studying in a second language is difficult. A big aspect of that is reading. Like college level readers, in your first language, you average or the average is around 300 to 450 words per minute. But even like advanced second language readers, the average is below 200 words per minute. So, those are people with really solid language skills, are still reading at about half the speed in their second language. Listening can be really difficult as well. And these problems with technology, the support for navigating these problems gets a little bit better, but anecdotally, the problems might be getting a little bit worse because, there are apps and things where you can kind of scan text and it'll translate it automatically and that sort of thing. But so, reading isn't necessarily getting better, and you just have to look at the world to know that listening isn't getting better either. So just know that this is a barrier and a burden to pretty much any second language international student. It will, at least be a challenge. And so keep that in mind, especially like with general education classes. If you give them like 3 really reading intensive classes all in the same semester, that's going to be a lot. And so trying to spread things out as much as possible in terms of types of classes can be helpful. And also think about what I call invisible prerequisites, because cultural knowledge is different. And so something like History 121 or 122 or PLS 101, which with a native student, you may want them to take it earlier because they had all these classes in high school and you want them to like take that class before they forget all that stuff. For, you know, for an international student, that may be like totally new information. Um, and so those classes can be quite difficult to navigate. And so again, like don't give them history 121 and PLS 101 and something else that's like really reading intensive or cultural all at the same time. Try to spread that stuff out if you can. All right. Well, those are just some tips for working with international students. And now I'm going to try to share some resources that are available. So one, if you ever have any kind of acute issue, like if you have a advisee or somebody that you come into contact with that's having a crisis of some sort, on campus, we do have the care and advocacy team that you can contact at internationalcare@missouri-state.edu. And that's a group of those of us work in our division that work to just kind of intervene and help connect international students with mental health support or community connection, safety resources, that sort of thing. So this is a good kind of first triage spot if somebody has a big issue and you need to connect them with support quickly. We've had students who've had fires in their apartments or floods in their apartments, all kinds of things. And so any kind of acute issue, the care and advocacy team is there. On a lighter note, transportation is an issue for lots of people in Springfield. And another thing that we have is a Saturday shuttle service. So international students can pay $10 a semester and they can access the shuttle for shopping needs. You can see it's every couple weeks and it goes to a variety of locations. I'm assuming all students can access this, but I don't remember exactly. Deja Smith would be the person to contact about this, and I'll share her information later. But again, like it's something we don't necessarily think of because it's Springfield, everyone has a car, but the majority of international students don't. And not being able to get around Springfield can be a big barrier. So if you encounter a student with those issues, put them in contact with us. So my division is community and global partnerships, which, on the one hand has Javik, on the other hand has me. So we're kind of a big, weird division in the university. And part of that, part of it is kind of the international side, the global partnership end of things. And the International Student Services Office you can find on the first floor of the Morris Center. Their primary role is getting the students here and helping them stay in status. So students definitely need to know about international student services, and you do. But in terms of supporting the students while they're here, that's not their primary role. It's keeping them here and in status while they're here. And so a really good person to know from International Student Services is Mason. And Mason works with CPT and OPT. CPT is curricular practical training. So international students in many/most cases are eligible for internships and externships and practicums and other opportunities, paid or unpaid. Those things are possible through CPT. It's just they need to work with Mason and they need to make sure that they get the correct authorization and things and that sort of thing. So if you have an international student who's interested in an internship or a practicum or something like that, Mason is a good person to reach out to, because things need to be confirmed. It's not a terribly difficult process, but it's a very, very important process, to get things okayed and in order on the front end so the student can have that opportunity. But sometimes we've had international students who are told like that, uh, you know, it's not possible for them to work with X or Y or Z, and lots of things are possible. It's just needs to follow the correct processes. So CPT is a cool thing that is available if there's an internship opportunity or something like that. And Mason also works with OPT, which is not Ozarks Public Television, which is also in our division. So there's lots of confusing things like that. But OPT is optional practical training, and that's basically after graduation when international students are eligible to stay and work for a period of time, getting career training. The Career Center is great, and Sherry Elkins is fantastic and works a lot with international students and works with Mason to talk about OPT and CPT. So Career Center is a great resource as well. And on the career resources card on My Missouri State, one of the things on that is going global, which any international student that you have who's like getting towards the end of their program, you need to double check with them and make sure that they're aware of that, because it has fantastic resources on CPT and OPT and job hunting and lots of different things. Like it lists companies that have done H-1B visas and lots of that different stuff. It's a pretty great resource. So that's something that advisors could help point international students towards and support some of the stuff the Career Center has going. All right. And then, so in our division, we had, it used to be IP, and now a big part of IP is changing to the Office of Global Education and Engagement, or OG, which is great because, you can see the gray hair. I feel pretty OG these days. But so Office of Global Education and Engagement covers all of the programs focused on international education, whether it's students coming here to Missouri State or education abroad and our students going elsewhere. So a couple things to know for in the Office of Global Education and Engagement, for your international students is the English Language Institute and the I Succeed Center. Both of those have been around for a while, especially the ELI has been here a lot of years. Both are undergoing some pretty significant changes, so I have some updates. So the ELI is now starting in fall 2025, going to be working with the FLI and also the Department of Languages, Cultures, and Religions to offer 4-credit language classes. So there will be 3 course codes. I think one or two of them is like LCR 199 or something, and another's LCR 299 or something. Or one might be 300 level. I don't have that in front of me. But these will be English language courses. One's focused on listening, one's focused on reading, one's focusing on like oral communication. And these are classes that students can take for credit. And we're working on putting together, 297 and 397. We're working on putting together a certificate, like a undergraduate certificate in English, because again, like we give degrees and certificates for French and Spanish and lots of different things. These international students are, definitely working in a second language. But so starting in the fall, you'll have these three classes that students could take. One problem with suggesting the ELI as a resource in the past was our schedule was a little bit different and the courses were non-credit. So if you had a student who was admitted through one of those other avenues with like a test score, or through a partner program and they wanted some extra English language support, it was a hard sell to get them to take a non-credit class that may not play very nice with the rest of their schedule. Now we have these three classes starting in the fall that students could take. That it doesn't need to be a specific sequence. They'll fit with the normal MSU schedule, but these are available for students both. Yeah, so if you have a student who's saying, hey, I'm struggling with reading or I'm struggling with like speaking or understanding what my professors are saying, that sort of thing, you could suggest some of these classes to them. And that way they can take those classes, get credit, stay in status. Hopefully pretty soon, they could work towards that certificate, but get that support. So that's exciting. And then again, the benefits for that is these are classes with our ELI teachers. So the curriculum and the instruction is all, experienced intensive English courses, focusing on developing academic skills, cultural knowledge, all those things students need to be successful. And the credits can either count as electives or again, hopefully soon count as part of an undergraduate certificate for studying English. So that's the English Language Institute, changing quite a bit, but still the same good people and good stuff. The other thing is the I Succeed Center, which I'm coordinating now. And the idea of the I Succeed Center is supporting international students and supporting staff and faculty in working with international students. So really the goal is to, act as a bridge between international students and the services and things that they have available. And so if you have an international student who's struggling or has questions or needs some help, the I Succeed Center is a good place to refer them, because we sort of work as a triage spot with helping students get the help that they need and that sort of thing. So if you have a student and it's like they came in and they're like they need some language help and they need some job hunting help and that sort of thing, you can send them to me and I can help them and connect them with the Career Center or talk to them about the ELI options or just work with them one-on-one to help them get where they're going. So the idea is that the I Succeed Center is going to help international students while they're here. International Student Services gets them here and gets them to what's next at the end of, around graduation. But the I Succeed Center is going to work with them while they're here to make sure they're supported and help them connect to services. And then the idea is also that the I Succeed Center will work with staff and faculty to help you all address any issues or questions or problems that you may have working with international students. So we're happy to do any and all of that. And so 2 people to know when I succeed is myself and Deja Smith. Deja, Deja is around a lot. A lot of you probably know Deja, but she works with New International Student Orientation, the Global Leaders and Mentors program, lots of the international student groups, and a lot of things. And so Deja is a big part of the international students' journey while they're here on campus. And I'll be working with the I Succeed Center, where students can make an appointment, or this semester we've started having drop-in hours in the Bear Claw, Monday through Friday mornings. And I'm also happy to do training and support for your offices. I've worked with lots of graduate teaching assistant groups. I've worked with majors to talk to them about working with international students. So I'll meet with offices or staff or faculty, and just to help address any issues that you have, or I'll look at resources and materials and things to try to make them globally accessible. Because a lot of the time, again, serving international students well is going to serve all students well. Like those comprehension questions, making sure that people really understand what you need them to understand. Like that's good. Or putting lots of detail in advising notes, or making sure you're communicating like orally and in writing. These are things that are going to help all students. First generation students, like anybody. So I'm happy to help with any of that. And then part of what I'm doing is also bug testing, kind of trying to find broken windows and that sort of thing. So that's fun. Okay, I've talked a lot and maybe talked a little more quickly than I planned. I'm nearly through my 30 slides. So what questions do we have? Anybody had issues advising international students, or something you have questions about?
Hey Phil, I'll go ahead and kick us off with a question. I know that
Mhm.
there will probably be some questions on the chat as well, but you had mentioned, not being able to know exactly what's going to happen for the fall semester with all the different factors impacting our international student population, but just more of a pulse check now, like with our current international students, how are they doing? With all the things that have been going on? Have you had a lot of students in distress, or and if there are things going on, are there any tips that you have for advisors if they come to us with some of those concerns?
I mean, I think kind of uncertainty and fear are definitely out there. I think I don't know of major incidents, but I don't pretend to know everything that's happening to anybody. I think in general, it's really common, like for an international student to have lots of positive experiences with people when they're interacting as individuals, and to have the occasional experience where somebody treats them badly, you know, when they're driving down the road, or like just kind of in passing, or when they're more of a stranger. Uh, that's a pretty safe assumption anyway. And so, like, being kind, being supportive, like being welcoming, um, the international students need it now. They've needed it just in general, but especially now, knowing that like just kind of the stuff that's in the air and in the rumor mill is bad, whether or not the like current present reality in Springfield, Missouri at Missouri State University is as bad as it may feel or appear. So I don't know, kindness is always good. I don't know of any terrible things that have happened, which is good. Um, I mean, and know that it's hard and it's uncertain. Like we had a program for refugees in Springfield, um, and with the grant funding for it was a partnership with like Springfield Public Schools and Boys and Girls Club, and like was serving about 30 recent refugees, and it you know the funding got frozen and it stopped in less than a week. And we don't know if or when it will come back. And that's bad for lots of people. And it's, again, it's that uncertainty. And so the stuff is around and it's in the air. Um, but there's not much that we can do to control that. Like a lot of the international students that are here, maybe they didn't travel back home over winter break or that sort of thing. So lots of them, I think, will probably, once they get here successfully, be more likely to stay rather than traveling back and home. And so back home, back and forth, just because visa offices are weird and there is that extra uncertainty of like, if I go home, am I going to be able to come back in spring semester with no problem and that sort of thing. And so, that's going to play into homesickness and culture shock and that sort of thing. And so, yeah, like be
Perfect.
kind.
Thanks, Phil. You do have a couple questions in the chat. I'm going to go ahead and read them aloud so we can capture the questions for those who may watch this recording later.
Yes, please.
Campbell had asked, what types of support will you offer international students in the I Succeed Center?
Yeah, so I mean, Campbell knows me, so I try really hard not to do somebody else's job. And so the job of the I Succeed Center isn't to recreate any of those services. It's basically just to be kind of a navigation hub. So a place where international students can come and then we help them figure out the problem and connect them to the people who can deal with the problem most successfully. And so, if somebody like this morning, I was working with a student who was having some like um, pronunciation issues and like wasn't feeling confident with her English and that sort of thing. Um, and I helped her with that directly because that's my field of expertise. But then I had another student recently having some academic integrity issues, and that was a whole big thing of helping that student navigate that process. And that was me learning some of it and helping the student learn some of it. And ultimately, I couldn't do or fix any of that on my own yet. But like it's connecting them to the people. And with something like OPT, I'm not going to counsel anybody on OPT. I'm going to connect them to Mason. Or if they're looking for a campus job, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to connect them to the career center. So it really is just a resource for helping them figure out kind of what are the issues that they're having and who are the resources that they can connect to for that. And then, if like I've met with Sherry in the Career Center, and I've looked at some of their materials and we've talked about ways that we can coordinate and do different things. And so yeah, it's really working in both directions of supporting staff and then getting the students to the staff and places. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And Phil, we have a request from Catherine to view the advising note. Again, that you had shared earlier, you had talked about
Okay.
the importance of advising notes and the importance of having detailed advising notes. So Catherine was hopeful that we could just see it again. And maybe if you wanted to share just a little bit more info on why you think that's a good advising note.
Yeah. So it's very detailed, both about the things that they spoke about, but also about the different requirements and the recommendation and that sort of thing. And so this was actually an advising note that was passed along from someone in International Student Services. They checked with people and like blanked out names and that sort of thing. So hopefully I'm not breaking FERPA and going on YouTube with it, because that would be cool. But yeah, it has lots of detail. It's clear, it's organized, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Like these are the things that you need. It's pointing them towards the resources that they need to go to. It's very, very clear of like what was being said to the student and what their requirements are and that sort of thing. So even if there were a problem and the advisor were making some kind of mistake that causes an issue with status, then the international, which I don't think was the case in this, but even if that happened, then the person in international student services can be like, oh, they talked about this and they said this. And so I can fix that confusion and address that problem and be like, no, um, or that kind of thing.
Okay. Another question. How would you advise international students who want to stay and develop their career in the US?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I'll give the short answer that again, I would be happy to chat with the student because there are lots and lots of different aspects of that. But pointing them to like experience as much as they can while they're here, and to really work on their language skills and their culture skills. And one thing I consistently say to international students is they need to pay attention to like what language are they living in? Like they came here to the US to use the language, but if they're only hearing someone speak English like in the hours that they're in the classroom, that's not, and then they go home and, everything is like in their first language the rest of the day. The conversations they're having, the like media that they're consuming, all that thing, then they're really not spending that much time in the second language. And so if they're wanting to like do, be here longer and have a career and that sort of thing, then like the more invested that they can get in university life, in the culture here, in their program, in those relationships, the better it will be for them. Um, so that's something I would really stress. Uh, Taking advantage of CPT and OPT is key for them to legally stay here if they're here on a student visa. Um, but to shoot for all that as well. And then after that, it's kind of a crapshoot. Like after OPT, like finding a company to like that sponsors H-1B visas and all of that process is difficult. That Going Global resource through the career resources, I think, card on My Missouri State has compiled all of that information of different companies and opportunities, and you can search by like community and by field and all kinds of things. So that's a really, really, really good resource for that. But yeah, I think making the most of the time here is also a really important part of that.
Bill, we have a couple more questions that have come in. Are there scholarships available for international students?
Yeah, and that's complicated too. uh, I mean, an interesting thing is like, if international students took like ACT and SAT, I think that they would be, I think it is possible for them to, I'm kind of getting out over my skis. Yes is the answer. Yes. And so recommending that they fill out the just general scholarship uh, application thing every year is good practice because some of that they're eligible for and some of it they're not, but it sorts it itself, I think. So yes. And they may or may not be here. Again, that's part of the thing on how they have come to the university. They may have funding or a scholarship, or they may be eligible for different things based on that.
Hey. Our next question is from Sarah in the MCHHS Student Success and Advisement Center. Sarah mentioned you talked about the challenges of academic English for our international students. What if they feel they need additional time during in-person assessments, especially in lengthy written work, such as essays, when questions are not shared in advance to facilitate preparation?
Right. And I had a student come with this question, and I'm kind of trying to uh, poke around and see what the end result answer is. I mean, second language learning does not qualify as like it's not a category in like the DRC or anything like that. Um, if they're like taking a test or something in the testing center, I do think that like them having a like bilingual paper dictionary is allowed for that sort of thing. And that's a really kind of low level, reasonable accommodation that they can ask for. But part of that is they need to learn to communicate with the faculty members. And that's always something I really stress is before the test, before you get into trouble or have issues, talk about expectations, talk about, strategies and that sort of thing with the faculty member, because that puts it on their radar and hopefully can mitigate some of those things. If you had a student in that boat who's really feeling that acutely, I think that'll be a great person to refer to those ELI, LCR 299 and 399 courses to get them some like focused help and support on that. And then just, push them towards the Bear Claw, push them towards the Writing Center, like have them use the resources that are available to them. Send them to the I Succeed Center and we can help. But that's ultimately they have to swim, and a lot of that is up to lots. I definitely will not even attempt to speak for faculty and all the different answers that they would give to that question, which is just the reality. It's like, what accommodations does your professor want to give in that situation?
Yeah. Bill, I think we have time for one more question. Dr. Lisa Hall in gerontology, a faculty member as well as an academic advisor, she stated, I appreciate that MSU has global connections and that there are advising sessions like this so that faculty and staff can grow in our awareness of international students' experiences. I have many wonderful memories of previous international students, and unfortunately, I have one very distressing memory. What does MSU do to help international students understand our cultural norms and expectations pertaining to gender equality and mutual respect between instructors and students?
The short answer is probably nothing. And so, I mean, that's part of the issue with the like academic culture thing. If it's an undergrad student, they'll take GEP 101, and GEP 101 has a million things to do and 12 weeks to do it. Um, if they're a grad student, then they don't. Like the IELTS, the TOEFL, the placement tests don't have anything about academic culture. It's all like language proficiency. So and new international student orientation hits on some of those things, but it's, a giant information dump in like 1.5 days, and Deja can only do so much. So the answer is not much. And again, that's something that like over the medium term, I'm definitely want to work on. So if you have something in mind, reach out to me. Um, but that's something that, again, it falls on all of us, if nothing else, to identify a student having issues with that and connect them to resources so they can uh, get the help and support. And again, like if that's a acute kind of wild case, that might be like something where you wanted to reach out to the academic care team, or the there are too many acronyms in the world. The
The cat.
CAT, sorry, right letters, wrong words in order. But that's a good thing. On the just regular academic referral form, there's also a like language and culture button that you can push on that gets forwarded to the CAT. And or if it's a less pressing issue, then referring them to like the I Succeed Center or that sort of thing. But yeah, as a university, I mean, we're very, very happy to like collect our share of the $1.1 billion, but we don't necessarily like have tons and tons of structures in place to kind of support people through all that. So it falls on all of us.
Okay. Bill, thank you for being a friend to the advising community and your willingness to participate in our advisor forum series. I know this is not the first time that you've done it. So on behalf of the attendees, thank you for sharing this information. For those of you who attended today's session, thank you for being here and the support that you give our international students. I hope many of you will be able to join us again on Wednesday on Zoom for our next advisor forum. Thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.